misconceptions about evolution. Some of these we've already talked about a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time, and you don't have a ton of note-taking to do on these. So the first one is evolution is, I always love this when someone says it's just a theory. Remember that the term theory means that many scientists have taken a lot of data to support this idea, and no one, given the current technology, can disprove this idea. When we're talking about the portion of evolution that is a theory, we are talking about all of the data, the anatomical features of fossils, skulls, limbs, embryos, I said fossils, biogeography, we talked about continental drift, and then also molecular biology, DNA sequences of amino acids. Here's another misconception. Individuals evolve. The term evolution means a change in the base sequence of the DNA from parent to offspring. Given that, can you change your DNA as a human individual? Can you will your DNA to change? No, right? So individuals do not evolve. Evolution, the big idea of evolution means that in a population, which is a species, like us, we're all Homo sapiens. What makes us a species is that we can potentially interbreed with one another. What that means is that we can potentially, possibly mate with one another and have offspring that are viable. Viable offspring can also have offspring. So evolution means that you can keep your species going, but then there's this whole natural selection influence that the environment that you live in is going to favor certain traits of a species or will not favor. In a population, those with the most advantageous traits, given the current environment, have an easier time surviving, thus an easier time reproducing and passing on those advantageous genes to offspring. Those that struggle to survive are so focused on their survival that they're not so conscious about, I gotta mate, I gotta mate, I gotta mate. First thing they're thinking is, I gotta survive. So survival, number one, if you do not have advantageous traits, you may not pass on your non-advantageous traits to your offspring, or you may not have offspring. So evolution, there's a lot of wheels moving together to make evolution happen in a population, not individuals. Here's another misconception. Evolution explains the origins of life. I've mentioned this before, and we're going to go over it when we talk about the history of life. Science says that we do not have proper data to support how life started. So that portion of evolution of how life started is hypothetical, not theory or theoretical. We don't have a ton of data to support this is exactly how life started. So we don't know, not sure. We'll talk about ideas that scientists have that show models of how this might be how life started, but we're not really sure. And organisms evolve on purpose. So again, as, let's say you and your mating partner, can you both be like, let's make our offspring have these advantageous traits? Can you do that? No. You can, like with my example of the female whale, choosing a male that has no legs as opposed to a male who has legs, she would choose the male without the legs who is more hydrodynamic, can move through water quicker and easier as opposed to a male with legs who would drag a little bit more, be slower. She'd want the faster whale who could get more food, run away from predators, protect her and her offspring. So that's not the same thing as evolving on purpose. Evolving on purpose, this is the idea that we can will ourselves, again, to, like, if I wanted to evolve wings, can I do that? No, right? So I can't just will myself. I can't, like, make myself have traits that I don't carry in my DNA. So those were just 4 misconceptions that a lot of people have about evolution. So hopefully those will stick with you too. Climate change. Climate change is one of the most impacting evolutionary factors right now in the history of Earth. So here's a lot of things about climate change. One is that I hear oftentimes people will say, I don't believe climate change is happening. Climate change has always happened, right? We went from, and just kind of generalizations, we had ice ages to warm ages to ice ages to warm ages, that we know climate has always been changing over time. We have lots of data to support that humans and what we are doing to support ourselves as a species in using fossil fuels, heating our homes, driving our cars, flying our airplanes, making our food, that we are accelerating what is happening naturally in terms of climate change to a point of warmth that we have never seen on the Earth before. Because we are doing all of these human activities that are causing increased warming on the Earth, we are seeing effects on every species and how they act in terms of what characteristics are favored in every environment. We act as agents of natural selection on other species, and we affect probably every single species on the planet in some way. So this is kind of an interesting thing to wrap your head around, is our activities that we do to support the comfort of humans living on this earth, we are making changes to the environment, to nature. Nature selects for natural selection. We are acting as agents of natural selection at every species on the planet. So, we've got tons of examples. I'm going to give you a few. So the way that we use insecticides and pesticides on our crops, a lot of those are toxic. So one of the things about using those toxic agents or those toxic chemicals is that those toxic chemicals can have a huge impact on the decomposers and detritivores. Those are the little tiny microorganisms that are going to break down waste and dead things. If we start to influence them in a negative way where they are dying off or they are more limited in their growth in a population, or excuse me, I should say in a community, then we're having a negative effect on them, for example. We'll talk more about this as well. Utilizing antibiotics. We're going to focus on that in lab today. So I'm going to get to a little bit more about this in detail in our next portion of lecture. So we'll come back to that in a second. And overfishing, our need to eat fish. What usually happens with fishing is the nets have a certain size of hole in them, and what they do is they capture all of the big fish, and the smaller fish can escape. But sometimes they use nets that have maybe smaller holes in them, and it captures both the juveniles, the medium, and the large fish. If we're capturing all the juveniles, then you are not leaving behind a group of individuals who can bring the next generation of fish to the ocean. We're just taking everything at once. So we need to be more conscientious in fishing, that we actually leave behind individuals in the population, the juveniles that can grow to reproductive age so that they can make more fish in the population. Other things that we're seeing. Definitely reduced ice and snow. Look at our winter. We've had barely any snow this winter here in our area, which is odd. We should have a regular covering of snow. Not only reduction in ice and snow, but some areas, even in the United States, like the East Coast, is having crazy amounts of snow. So here they're getting way too much snow and we're getting not enough snow. So we have that imbalance in climate. Growing seasons are longer, which seems like it could be a good thing, and we'll get into why that may not be a good thing. Shifts in life cycles of species. So it used to be that mosquitoes had like a period in the summer where you would notice them a lot more. Now we're seeing mosquitoes the entire summer, even the spring all the way to the fall. Because temperatures have gotten warmer, mosquitoes are able to have 2 life cycles in a year, whereas before they would have 1, because we have a longer warm season.
Yeah, this summer it was actually it was in September. I was outside and I was trying to harvest gourds from my garden and that were already fruiting, and it was around sunset, the time of day when mosquitoes usually come out, and I was getting bit by mosquitoes in September, and I was like, oh my god, I hate this climate change.
I think we got mosquito bites in October this year, so yeah.
Yeah, it was like late September. I was like, I got it. It was one evening where I was getting attacked by mosquitoes, and my conservationist brain went off.
Yeah.
Big alarm.
Yeah, for sure. We're having changes. So we're having more mosquitoes per year, which mosquitoes in many areas of the world, not in our area in particular, but they can carry diseases like malaria, for example. And so if we're having mosquito growth cycles happen more often, we're also seeing that mosquitoes can expand to areas of the world where we've never seen them before. So let's say on an area where there's a mountain and the kind of 3/4 top of the mountain, we've never seen mosquitoes in those areas because it's too cold. Now we're seeing maybe 3/4 of the entire mountain has mosquito populations on them because it's warmer. So we're definitely seeing a spreading of not only the life cycles of mosquitoes, but also the diseases that they may carry. How cute is that? This is a red squirrel in Canada. And what's happening is that some of them have evolved to mate earlier because the warm season has started earlier. And those with the ability to mate earlier have an advantage over those who mate later. So we see an influence, and we see that time of reproduction, it's changing, and we're going to talk about on Thursday all of the different kind of factors that may have a gene pool of a species change over time. So this is another example. Here's one more example. This species of owl. So there's generally 2 color traits in this population, and which color trait has been favored over time has totally shifted. So when it was more snowy, this owl, this trait color owl, was more favored because you can see, if you think about tree bark that has snow on it, it looks kind of like that, right? You've got some of the brown sticking out, and then you have snow in the grooves. So this owl, when it's snowy, would be favored because it could blend in easier with the trees, with the bark. But when you have no snow and the tree is more brown, this owl trait is more favored. So again, we're seeing evolution, natural selection as an influence of humans on other species in just 3 examples that I've given you there. So there is lots of data that shows that humans are having an impact in terms of the evolution of every species on the planet.